Cedric Muhammad, CEO, the Hip-Hoppreneur. We found a great book to start our book club with leading up to Hip-Hoppreneur U, which we'll talk about more in coming weeks. But 50 Cent's book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, really covers the area of mentality and strategy and the four elements that we are focusing on, policy and spirit being the other two. What I liked about the book really speaks to what I've liked about 50. If you have read my book, The Entrepreneurial Secret, you know that we start our book off referencing 50 Cent as a necessity-driven entrepreneur that we can learn a lot from. But what I like about this book in particular is it allows for the transition that I believe every marketing plan in hip hop music for at least the I would say the bulk of 25 to 20 years has focused on the immaturity of the artist. So those of you may know I've talked a lot about my interaction with Source Magazine, and I sat down with Dave Mays, the publisher, one day, and I asked him why a reader from the magazine that grew up on it couldn't find it relevant, say 10, 15 years later. And it was because he had been advised, and all of hip hop record labels and the industry is advised to target consistently over and over again a 17-year-old male. So that breeds immaturity into the culture. So what I like about 50's book is it's introspective and it's somewhat retrospective or backward looking in terms of some of the moves that he's made commercially throughout his career. So there's a relevance that transcends his development as an artist and now toward his evolution into what I would call a leadership profile, what we focus on at Hip-Hoppreneur. So, if you look at the 7 vices and the 7 virtues in life, we're generally going to have a problem with one and exemplify some level of mastery at a relatively young age of another. And I believe 50's grasp of fear is at a mastery level in terms of self-awareness and understanding. And again, what COVID-19 is putting pressure on is people's attachments to personality, layers of ideology, dogma. All of that is being proven to be irrelevant. And so self-awareness is probably one of the highest states that we can reach, levels of consciousness. I think 50 is extremely self-aware of his strengths and flaws. So the book gets to that. Other thing that makes 50 unique, and I think I could make the case, you all know I feel Wu-Tang is the greatest group in the history of hip hop just on economics and business alone. You could almost make the sense that 50 is the most community, in terms of neighborhood economics, 50's career may have had the most impact on the neighborhood. And I can almost rest my case on the mom and pop record store, how it was impacted by the rise and fall of the mixtape, which was central to 50's career. So he talks a lot about different business deals and moves that he made. He talks about his signing with Eminem, that he did it more so on the basis of association and long-term vision than what he could have gotten up front in terms of maximizing that initial payout. That's a great principle that he talks about a lot in the book, is how you can defer gratification for a greater gain, and that can be in your best interest economically long term. But I slightly disagree with 50. I believe that there was really a 2-year period from 99 to 2001 and then in 2002 where mixtapes filled a void in the industry. You really did not have a lot of strong releases around that 2002, 2003 period where his commercial career took off. And I don't know that anybody can quantify the amount of money that went into mixtapes as opposed to official record label commercial releases. But I believe more money, a multiple of money, went into mixtapes. And there were several record stores that were kept afloat purely on the strength of 50 Cent mixtapes. So maybe at some point I'll break that down, take my time, go a little bit slower with that. One area where I think 50 wrestles with is his understanding of ethnic enclaves, community-based economics, and how that relates to how different communities function. In the earlier part of his book, I think he has a misunderstanding about why blacks leave the neighborhood relative to why other immigrants would move out of a neighborhood to go to the suburbs. One thing that he doesn't point out is that the immigrant community, although he celebrates their hustle, particularly in a later chapter, the entrepreneurial hustle of an immigrant, he praises. The one thing he misses, though, is the immigrant community, the earlier ones that he references, you know, in the case of Chinese and Jewish communities, they own the neighborhood before they leave. Perhaps in some of our Mexican family, Indian American communities that have come later to America in the immigrant journey, they go more so family-based, perhaps stay in the community and then leave for a quality of life in the suburbs after they have saved money together, etc. But the path of the Chinese and the Jewish community, that is not the path that 50 describes, I think, rather broadly. But he does a great job at the end emphasizing what he celebrates as the entrepreneurial hustle of the immigrant. And I totally agree on that. So why is this book, without going into the details and giving away what I want you to experience in reading it and us to have a continued conversation about it, why I think this book matters is because I think, unlike other artists who have a vested interest in keeping a barrier between them and the consumer, some of the older hip hop artists, 50 provides instructive examples that extend a level of vulnerability, wisdom through vulnerability. And I think some of the larger artists cannot afford to do that, either because of where they are in their careers and some of the circles that they move in, or because they were marketed in a way where separateness and distance from everyday people was part of their success. That model's done. You know, I've gone on record and said that Jay-Z is really the last big artist that can get away with that level of distance from the masses. So he's the last one to come through that door. If 50's the total opposite of that. Business objective, why do I think 50's doing this? I think he's genuinely grown into philanthropy. I think, you know, there's a lot of maturation. I think it's therapeutic for him. We have commissioned data on specific artists at Hip-Hoppreneur, and we have a ream of numbers on 50. And 50 has a somewhat of a dilemma, because as he moves from hip hop success and now is enjoying that in the world of streaming programming, TV programs, cable shows, etc. What made him great as an artist hurts him. He has very high negatives amongst all groups, and that's an asset in hip hop. And he talks to some degree about not wanting to have a neutral disposition in terms of your audience looking at you. You want people to love or hate you. Well, we've talked a lot about the difference between actors, athletes, and artists, and why it's easier for some to be activists or more politically involved now than others. And I won't go through that. We talked a little bit in terms of J-Lo. But high negatives in the world of TV, Hollywood, does not play as well as it does in hip hop from a music standpoint. And I think that this book shows more of a gentler, softer side of 50 that will bode well for his business dealings and his evolution. So I think it's a great move. One of the things that 50 did that I love is he actually reads the book. So 8 hours. He does a great job. It's in his voice. A lot of people will write a book and they'll have somebody else read the book, and it just doesn't have the same level of authenticity. It's a great read. It's a great listen. I talk a lot about blueprints and codes. If you wanted a reference in terms of a blueprint and a code, whether you agreed or disagreed, I could highly recommend this. So I look forward to having a conversation about the specific moments in the book, chapters. There's one thing I can totally relate to. I'll save, maybe we'll talk about it on IG Live. It's 50's emphasis on sobriety. Not a big drinker or smoker. Same true with me. And some of the stories I had when I was with Wu-Tang Management, I almost fell out laughing as 50 talks about being around people who are heavy smokers and heavy drinkers and some of the maneuvers that you pull off. But one of the things that I thought was great that he got across is the level of success that you can achieve without indulging in those practices. A lot of artists do treat them as crutches, and respect. I have some very fond memories of members of the Klan knowing that I didn't smoke, for instance, and they were somewhat protective of any situation that I might be in where that was around. So, Cedric Muhammad, CEO, Hip-Hoppreneur, our first book in our book club, 50 Cent's book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. Great read. Let us know what you think. Peace.